Well, welcome back. We're on chapter 3 of To Kill a Mockingbird. This is one of my favorite books. Keep in mind that the first 11 chapters, it's divided in two. The first 11 chapters are all about the childhood of Scout and Jem. And then chapters 12 through 31, it's about how they grow up kind of quickly during this Great Depression civil rights era when the trial starts. So the novel is one that's called Bill Dunn's Roman. The kids will go from innocent to mature experience pretty quickly. But you'll see on this timeline that Jem, the brother, gets there a little quicker than Scout, which I guess makes sense because I think the age difference is 3 years, 9 and 12, or something like that. So we are in chapter 3, and we'll have some questions or quizzes after each of these chapters. So let's get started. Catching Walter Cunningham in the schoolyard gave me some pleasure, but when I was rubbing his nose in the dirt, Jem came by me and told me to stop. "You're bigger than he is," he said. "He's as old as you, nearly." I said, "He made me start off on the wrong foot." "Let him go, Scout." "Why?" "He didn't have any lunch," I said, and explained my involvement in Walter's dietary affairs. Walter had picked himself up and was standing quietly listening to Jem and me. His fists were half-cocked, as if expecting an onslaught from both of us. I stomped at him to chase him away, but Jem put out his hand and stopped me. He examined Walter with an air of speculation. "Your daddy, Mr. Walter Cunningham, from Old Sarum, at Whitney Point?" Walter nodded as if he'd been raised on fish food. His eyes, as blue as Dill Harris's, were red-rimmed and watering. There was no color in his face except at the tip of his nose, which was moistly pink. He fingered the straps of his overalls, nervously picking at the hooks. So I don't know if you remember Walter the dad, but we have Walter the dad, Walter the son. Walter the dad is someone that Atticus had represented in a court hearing for some hickory nuts and stove wood or something. He didn't have enough money to pay him in the Great Depression. And you can tell here, right by the son wearing overalls and a couple other things, to be honest. His eyes looked like they were raised on fish food. Red-rimmed, watering nose mostly pink. To be honest with you, these are signs we sometimes look for at Applebee because if there's malnourishment, you'll see kids, their eyes might be really red and watery, their noses might be pink. This is Walter. So as his sister's kicking the snot out of him in the yard, Jem realizes that, geez, this is my dad's helping out, and my sister has kicked his son's butt in the yard, so he invites him to dinner, try and make things right. A little more mature, Jem, and Scout. Jem suddenly grinned at him. "Come home to dinner with us, Walter," he said. "We'd be glad to have you." Walter's face brightened and then darkened. Remember, just like the dad, the Cunningham, might be poor. They don't take things they can't pay back. "Yeah, I'd love to come to dinner." Jem said, "Our daddy's a friend of your daddy. Scout here, she's crazy. She won't fight you anymore." "I wouldn't be too certain of that," I said. Jem's free dispensation of my pledge irked me, but precious noontime minutes were ticking away. "Yeah, Walter, I won't jump on you again. Don't you like butter beans? Our Cal's a real good cook." Walter stood where he was, biting his lip. Jem and I gave up, and we were nearly to the Radley place when Walter called, "Hey, I'm coming." When Walter caught up with us, Jem made a pleasant conversation with him. "A Hank lives there," he said. Cordially pointing to the Radley house. "Did you ever hear about him, Walter?" "Reckon I have," said Walter. "Almost died first year I come to school and ate them pecans. Folks says he poisoned them and put him over on the school side of the fence." Jem seemed to have little fear of Boo Radley now that Walter and I walked beside him. Indeed, Jem grew boastful. "I went all the way up to the house once," he said to Walter. "Anybody who went up to the house once ought not to still run every time he passes. And who's running, Miss Priss? You are when ain't anybody with you." By the time we reached our front steps, Walter had forgotten he was a Cunningham. Jem ran to the kitchen and asked Calpurnia to set next the plate. We had company. Atticus greeted Walter and began a discussion about crops neither Jem nor I could follow. Now you might notice that he had forgotten he was a Cunningham. We're looking for figurative language examples in this one. Does he literally forget he's a Cunningham? No. But what he does do is he forgets he's a poor kid with no food. Instead, he feels like he's just one of the kids. What we have to get good at with speech and literature is looking for those little notations, those little examples of literature, literary merit, so that we can see what the author is trying to stress. We're just kids. That's the stress. The reason I can't pass the Cunningham, by the time we reached our kitchen, Walter forgot it was Cunningham, And Atticus greeted Walter and followed a discussion neither Jem or I could follow. The reason I can't pass the first grade, Mr. Finch, is I had to stay out every spring and help Papa with the chopping, but there's another net at the house now that's field side. Did you pay a bushel of potatoes for him? I asked, but Atticus shook his head at me. Why did Atticus shake his head at Scout when she asked Walter at the dinner table? Oh my gosh, did your dad pay a bushel of potatoes to get you out of your mom? Could you not pay your bill for them either? Awkward. That's why. While Walter piled food on his plate, he and Atticus talked together like two men to the wonderment of Jem and me. Expounding, what a nice vocab word, explaining, use that one, expounding upon something. The text is expounding. Feel that. Upon finding problems, Walter interrupted to ask if there was any molasses in the house. Atticus summoned Calpurnia, who returned bearing the syrup pitcher. She stood waiting for Walter to help himself. Walter poured syrup on his vegetables and his meat with a generous hand. He probably would have poured it in his milk glass had I not asked him what the Sam Hill he was doing. The silver saucer clattered when he replaced the pitcher, and he quickly put his hands in his laps. Then he ducked his head. What's Walter feeling? Yeah, embarrassed. Scout, that's right. Atticus shook his head at me again. But he's going to drown his dinner in syrup, I protested. He poured it all over. My dad was really dirt poor. I don't know how much I told you, but dirt poor. Like, cooked eggs on a shovel from his eggs he stole from the farmer on the way to school, cooked them in the woods before he got there, wore bread bags on his feet, he didn't have boots. Poor. My dad told me when you don't have stuff like ketchup, syrup, those things seem like such big deals. You just go crazy when you get them. I think that's Walter. And Scout's embarrassed him for it because she's never felt that need. Keep in mind, it is the Great Depression, 1938-ish year. It was then that Calpurnia, the cook, their helper in the house, she was a black lady, requested my presence in the kitchen. She was furious. And when she was furious, Calpurnia's grammar became erratic. When in tranquility, her grammar was good as anybody in Maycomb. Atticus said it had more to do with education. She had more education than most colored folks. And when she squinted down at me, tiny lines on her eyes deepened. There's some folks who don't eat like us, she said. And she whispered fiercely, but you ain't called on to contradict him at the table when they don't. That was your company. And if he wants to eat up that tablecloth, you let him eat here. He ain't company, Kelly's just a Cunningham. Hush your mouth. Don't matter who anybody sets foot in this kitchen. This house is your company, and don't you let me catch you remarking on the ways like you so high and mighty. Your folks might be better than the Cunninghams, but it don't count for nothing the way you're disgracing them. If you can't pick to eat at the table, you can just sit here and eat in the kitchen. Calpurnia sent me through the swinging door to the dining room with a stinging smack. I retrieved my plate and finished dinner in the kitchen, thankful though that I was spared the humiliation of facing them again. I told Calpurnia, just wait. I'd fix her one of these days when she wasn't looking. I'd go up and drown myself in Barker's Eddy, and then she'd be sorry. Besides, I added, she'd already got me in trouble one day. She taught me to write, and it was all her fault. Oh, hush your fussing, she said. Jem and Walter returned to school ahead of me, staying behind to advise Atticus of Calpurnia's iniquities. Her evilness was worth the solitary sprint past the rabbit place. She just likes Jem better than she likes me anyway, I concluded, and suggested that Atticus lose no time in packing her off. Have you ever considered that Jem doesn't worry her half as much as Atticus's voice was flinty? I have no intention of getting rid of her now or ever. We couldn't operate a single day without Cal. Have you ever thought of that? You think about how much Cal does for you when you mind her leave here. I returned to the school and hated Calpurnia steadily until a sudden shriek shattered my resentments. Oh, look at that. There's that nice alliteration with those S's. Makes it stand out, doesn't it? Use that in your writing. I looked up to see Miss Caroline standing in the middle of the room, sheer horror flooding her face. Oh, it's not very figurative language. Not really flooding, but, Apparently she had revived enough to persevere in her profession. There's some alliteration again. Oh, it's alive, she screamed. The male population of the class rushed as one to her assistance. Lord, I thought, she's scared of a mouse. Little Chuck Little, whose patience with all things was phenomenal, said, which way did he go, ma'am, Miss Caroline? Tell us which way he went. Quick, DC. Turned to a boy behind him. DC, shut the door. We'll catch him. Quick, ma'am. Where'd he go? Miss Caroline pointed a shaking finger not at the door, not at a desk, but to a hulking individual unknown to me. Little Chuck's face contracted, and he said gently, "Ma'am, you mean him?" "Yes, he's alive. Did he scare you some way?" Miss Caroline said desperately, "I was just walking by when it crawled out of his hair. Oh, just crawled out of his hair." Little Chuck grinned broadly. "Oh, there ain't no need to fear a cootie, ma'am. You never seen one? Now don't you be afraid. You just go back to your desk and teach us some more." So a little piece of life. Little Chuck was another member of the population who didn't know where his next meal was coming from. Now look at there, we get another example of something in text. Two people, Walter, little Chuck Little, very poor, but born gentlemen. Could there be some theme, some lesson from this chapter? Both poor, but both gentlemen. Could that be beneficial for Scout to see things from their point of view? Might that be Atticus's reason for having Walter over, or keeping her in public school here with these kids? When you're trying to think about what's the central idea, look for items that are repeated twice, that lift to the surface, like this issue of poverty and yet politeness. He put his hand under her elbow and led Miss Caroline to the front of the room. "Now don't you fret, ma'am. There ain't no need to fear Cootie. I'll just fetch you some cool water." The Cootie's host showed not the faintest interest in the furor he had wrought. He searched his scalp above his forehead, located his guest, pinched it between his thumb and forefinger. Miss Caroline watched the process in horrid fascination. Little Chuck brought water in a paper cup, and she drank it gratefully. Finally, she found her voice. "Oh, what's your name, son?" she asked softly. The boy blinked. "Oh, who, me?" Miss Caroline nodded. "Burris Ewell." Miss Caroline inspected her roll book. "I have a Ewell here, but I don't have a first name. Would you spell your first name for me?" "I don't know how. They call me Burris to home." "Oh, well, Burris," said Miss Caroline, "I think we better excuse you for the rest of the afternoon. I want you to go home and wash your hair." And from her desk, she produced a thick volume, leafed through its pages, and read for a moment. "A good home remedy for Burris, I want you to go home and wash your hair with lye soap. When you're done with that, treat yourself with kerosene." "What for, missus?" "To get rid of the cooties. You see, Burris, the other children might catch them, and you wouldn't want that, would you?" The boy stood up. He was the filthiest human being I had ever seen. His neck was dark gray, his backs of his hands were rusty, his fingernails were black deep into the quick. He peered at Miss Caroline from a fist-sized space on it, clean space on his face. No one had noticed him, probably because Miss Caroline and I had been entertaining the class most of the morning. "And Burris," and Miss Caroline, "please bathe yourself before you come back tomorrow." The boy laughed rudely. "Oh, you ain't sending me home, missus. I was on the verge of leaving. I've done my time for this year." Miss Caroline looked puzzled. "What do you mean by that?" The boy did not answer. He gave a short, contemptuous snort. Like that word, contemptuous. Add that to the lexicon, personal dictionary. One of the younger members of the class answered it. "Oh, he is one of the Ewells, ma'am," and I wondered if his explanation would be as unsuccessful as mine attempt. But Miss Caroline seemed willing to listen. "Whole school's full of them. They come here the first day, and then they leave. The truant lady gets them here because she threatens them with the sheriff, but she gives up trying to hold them. She reckons she's carried out the law, just getting their names on the roll and running them here first day. You're supposed to mark them absent the rest of the year. Of course, we don't have a truant officer here. We just send Mrs. Wheeler, Mrs. Maroney, and Mrs. Marcolina to your house. But then if you don't show up for 20 years, you get dropped. No longer a student. Not a good thing. Anyway, or DSS can come, I guess, too. But what about their parents, Miss Caroline? Asked in genuine concern. "Ain't got no mother," was their answer, "and their pa, he's right contentious." Burris Ewell was flattered by their recital. "Yep, been coming to the first day, the first grade, for 3 years now," he said expansively. "Reckon if I'm smart this year, they'll promote me to the second." Oh dear, that sounds not so good. Look at Jeff Foxworthy do. Miss Caroline said, "Sit back down, Burris." And the moment she said it, I knew she had made a big mistake. The boy's condescension flashed to anger. "You trying to make me, missus?" Little Chuck Little got to his feet. "Let him go, man," he said. "He's a mean one. He's a hard-down mean one. And there's some little folks in here." This is a one-room schoolhouse. Actually, if you remind me around, my husband's grandma taught in a one-room schoolhouse in Marathon. I still have the textbooks if you want to see them. Anyway, Little Chuck Little was among the most diminutive, small guys. But when Burris turned to him, Little Chuck's right hand went to his pocket. "Watch your step, Burris," he said. "I'd soon as kill you as look at you. Now go home." What does Little Chuck Little have in his pocket? That's right, a knife. When I first got here, every boy carried a knife in their pocket. It was okay, nobody cared. We actually had bullets on the school bus. That was one of my weird announcements on my first day of school here. Hey boys, I know it's hunting season, but if you could please keep your bullets in your pocket, we'd appreciate it. Oh, never heard that in the suburbs announcements, but okay. We used to have a rifle range in the basement. Things have changed, haven't they? Anyway, Burris seemed to be afraid of a child half his height, and Miss Caroline took advantage of his indecision. Burris, go home. If you don't, I'll call the principal. I'll have to report this anyway. Voice snorted and slouched. Alliteration again. Emphasize something. And moved leisurely to the door. Safe led around range, he turned and shouted, report me damned, you ain't no snot-nosed beep of a school teacher ever born. Gonna make me do nothing. You ain't making me go nowhere, missus. You just remember that. You ain't making me go nowhere. He waited until he was sure she was crying, and then she shuffled out of the building. Soon we were clustered on her desk, trying in our various ways to comfort her. He's a mean one, below the belt. You ain't called on to teach folks like that. That ain't Maycomb's ways, Miss Caroline. Not really. Now don't you fret, ma'am. Miss Caroline, why don't you read us a story? That cat thing was real fine this morning. Miss Caroline smiled, blew her nose, and said, thank you, guys. A full gallop of my gloom had deepened to match the house. Oh, sorry. We went past the Radley house. That seems weird. That cat thing was fine. Miss Caroline blew her nose. They read, You Darlings, first grade with a long narrative about a toad frog that lived in the hall. Must be she's walking home. When I passed the Radley place for the fourth time that day, twice at full gallop, my gloom had deepened to match the house. If the remainder of the school year was fraught with drama as the first day, perhaps it would be mildly entertaining. Then she didn't want to go before. But the prospect of spending 9 months refraining from reading and writing made me think of running away. By late afternoon, most of my traveling plans were complete, and when Jem and I raced each other up the sidewalk to meet Atticus coming home from work, he didn't give us much of a race. It was a habit to run and meet Atticus the moment we saw him round the post office corner in the distance. Atticus seemed to have forgotten my noontime fall from grace. He was full of questions about school. My replies were monosyllabic, and he didn't press me. Perhaps Calpurnia sensed that my day had been a grim one. She let me watch her fix supper. Shut your eyes, open your mouth, I'll give you a surprise, she said. It was not often that she made crackling bread, and she said she never had time, but with both of us in school today, it had been an easy one for her. So she knew I loved crackling bread. I missed you today, she said. The house was so lonesome without by 2 o'clock. I had to turn on my radio. Why, Jem and me ain't ever in the house unless it's raining. You know, she said. But one of you's always calling distance, and I wonder how much of the day I spent just calling after you. When she said she said, getting up to the kitchen chair, it's time to make a pan of crackling bread, I reckon. You run along now and let me get supper. Sorry, my food is hopping on the table. Calpurnia bent down and kissed me. I ran along, wondering what she came over her. She had wanted to make up with me. That was it, I guess. She had always been hard on me. She had at least seen the error of her fractious ways. She was so sorry and too stubborn to say so. I was wary from the dame's crimes. After supper, Atticus sat down with his paper and called, Scout, ready to read? The Lord sent me more than I could bear, and I went to the front porch. Atticus followed me. Something wrong, Scout? I told Atticus I didn't feel very well, and I didn't think I wanted to go to school anymore, if that was all right with him. Atticus sat down in the swing and crossed his legs. His fingers wandered to his watch pocket. He said that was the only way he could think. He waited in amiable silence, and I sought to reinforce my position. You never went to school, and you do all right, so I'll just stay home, too. You can teach me like Granddaddy taught you and Uncle Jack. No, I can't, said Atticus. I have to make a living. Besides, they put me in jail if I kept you home. Dose of magnesia for you tonight and school tomorrow. I feel all right. No, really? Thoughts on now, what's the matter? Bit by bit, I told him about the day's misfortune and said, you taught me all wrong, so you can't ever read anymore, ever. Papa, or please don't send me back, please, sir. Atticus stood up and walked to the front porch, under the porch. When he completed his examination of the wisteria vine, he strolled back to me. First of all, he said, you can learn a simple thing, Scout. You'll get a lot better, along with all kinds of folks. You never really understand a person. If you realize you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view. Sir, until you climb into their skin and walk around in it. Now that is a second and probably most significant example of figurative language. We don't really want to silence a bonanza here and zip ourselves up in someone's skin. but we do want to know what it's like to be in someone else's, life for a day, shoes for a day. So he's trying to get her to see things from Miss Caroline's perspective, which is a theme, a central idea lifting to the surface of this chapter. You have Walter, you have Miss Caroline, you have little Chuck Little, different points of view, see things from their side. Geez, with today's dangerous climate, everyone all upset all the time on all different sides of things. And maybe that's a good thing, seeing things from others' point of view. Certainly a theme of chapter 3, and the order element figurative language helps us see that. Atticus said, I had learned many things, same as Caroline had learned several things herself. She had learned not to hand something to a Cunningham for one thing. If Walter and I had put ourselves in her shoes, we'd have seen it an honest mistake on her part. We could not expect her to learn all of Maycomb's ways in one day, and we could not hold her responsible when she didn't know better. I'll be dodged, I said. I didn't know better than not to read to her, and she held me responsible. Listen, Atticus, I don't have to go to school. I was bursting with a sudden thought. Burrsule, remember him? He just goes to school the first day. The truant lady reckons she's carried out the law when she gets his name on the roll. You can't do that, Scout. Atticus says, sometimes it's better to bend the law a little in special cases. In your case, though, the law remains rigid. So, to school you must go. I don't see why I have to go when he doesn't. Then listen. Atticus said the rules had been the disgrace of Maycomb for 3 generations. None of them had done an honest day's work in his recollection. He said that some Christmas, when he was getting rid of the tree, he would take me with him and show them where they lived. They were people, but they looked like animals. They go to school anytime they want when they show the famous symptom of wanting an education, said Atticus. There are ways of keeping them in school by force, but it's silly to force people like the Yules into a new environment. I feel like Lucy is home for a wayward girl at St. Lucy's. If I didn't go to school, you'd force me to? Let's leave it at this, said Atticus dryly. You, Miss Scoutfinch, are of the common folk. You must obey the law. He said that the Yules were members of an exclusive society made up of Yules. In certain circumstances, the common folk judicially allowed them certain privileges by the simple method of becoming blind to some of the Yules' activities. They didn't have to go to school for one thing, and another, Mr. Bob Yule, or his father, was permitted to hunt and trap out of season. Atticus, that's bad, I said. Maycomb County hunting out of season was a misdemeanor, a capital felony in the eyes of the populace. Oh, it's against the law, all right, said my father, and it's certainly bad, but when a man spends his relief, his welfare checks on green whiskey, his children have a way of crying for hunger pains. I don't know of any landowner around here who begrudges those children any game their father can hit. Mr. Yule shouldn't do that. Of course he shouldn't, but he'll never change his ways. Are you going to take out your disapproval on his children? No, sir, I mumbled. Again, seeing things from others' point of view, see it lifting to the surface, and I made a final stand. But if I keep on going to school, we can never read anymore. That's really bothered you, isn't it? Yes, sir. When Atticus looked down at me, I saw the expression on his face that always made me expect something. You know what a compromise is, he asked. Bending the law? No, an agreement reached by mutual concessions. It works this way, he said. If you concede the necessity of going to school, we'll go on reading every night just as we always have. Is it a bargain? Yes, sir. We'll consider it sealed without the usual formality, Atticus said, when he saw me spit on my hand. As I opened the screen door, Atticus said, by the way, Scout, you better not say anything at school about our arrangement. Why not? I'm afraid our activities would receive with considerable disprobation by the more learned authorities. Jem and I were accustomed to our father's last will and testament diction, as lawyer talk, and we were at all times free to interrupt Atticus for a translation when beyond our understanding. Sir, I never went to school, he said, but I have a feeling that if you tell Miss Caroline we read every night, she'll get after me, and I wouldn't want her after me. Atticus kept us in his fits that evening, gravely reading columns of prints about a man who sat on a flagpole for no discernible reason, which was a reason enough for Jem to spend the following Saturday aloft in the treehouse. Jem sat from after breakfast until sunset and would have remained overnight had not Atticus severed his supply lines. I had spent most of the days climbing up and down, running errands for him, providing him with literature, nourishment, and water, and was carrying him blankets for the night when Atticus said I paid no attention to him. Jem would come down. Atticus was right. All right, so I've given you a little study guide to fill in to help you out. And after you're done with your study guide, you're supposed to write a 4-sentence paragraph explaining how what literary element helped you to see the central idea of this chapter. That'll be sentence 1. And then you can use any of these facts and the explanation you have from up above underneath. So I'm looking for a good 4-6 sentence little paragraph here. Actually, let me say that again. 6 to 10 sentences. 6 to 10. There's plenty of meat in this chapter, and a good paragraph that you read could be at least 6 sentences. Good topic sentence with your literary element and central idea, and some facts underneath. It's step, if you will, into the chapter. All right, thank you for listening.